Media giants are in flux as mergers, franchise struggles, and political undercurrents are all reshaping the current landscape in the worlds of entertainment and major media. Joining us now is longtime friend of the show, Seth Schachner, managing director at Strat Americas, for what this means for viewers, investors, and the future of streaming. Seth, thank you as always. What a busy week for you to join us, but I'm grateful you're here.
Yeah, great to be here, JD. There's certainly, every week that goes by, there's a new announcement, whether it's in streaming or platform. So it's an exciting one for sure.
So I'm going to let you somewhat take the lead here. What are those latest announcements? Of course, you and I are talking the morning of Disney's anticipated third quarter earnings. We could start there, or any other big announcement that you find yourself thinking a lot about on a busy week like
Yeah,
this one.
absolutely. The thing that's top of mind this morning, just, news that kind of broke last night, comes from the sports landscape. And sometimes people think it's a little different than a lot of these entertainment verticals, but got a lot of very similar characteristics. Last night, Disney's ESPN announced an alliance with the NFL. And, on some levels, it looks like a standard thing where they're going to kind of be swapping assets and one's picking up some games, one's getting some other games lost. But what's going to happen is that ESPN's about to launch a standalone sports app. It's going to have a ton of great stuff in it. But they're now going to have one of the NFL's assets in it, the NFL Network, which has been kind of a standalone product, not completely successful on its own, and some piece of the red zone as well. And what's really striking to me is that the league is actually getting a piece of ownership, a little equity interest, 10%, in ESPN, which is probably a multi-billion-dollar valuation, basically. It reminds me of stuff that I saw even back in the days of early music when rights holders would swap, for stakes and things like Spotify. And I think it's rather groundbreaking. And I don't know if it's the MLB or the other leagues like NBA are looking at it opportunistically, but that's very, very exciting stuff for me to see. That is probably top of mind, along with solid results. They've got parks. They've got a new park coming in Abu Dhabi. Visitation is up, even with some of the pricing pressures. And, there's always a ramp on what pictures are coming with Disney as well. There'll be an Avatar later this year. But I still see that enterprise, and, Mr. Iger's stamp is all over it, is kind of world class in the way to do it these days, basically.
Let me ask you a quick follow up about NFL Red Zone, because as a big NFL football fan, we love Scott Hansen. We've always loved, NFL fans have loved the NFL Network's pure play product for a lot of reasons. One of them is that Scott Hansen famously says every Sunday, 7 hours of commercial free football. And it is the commercial free part that I wonder if we are now in our waning days. Would it be your expectation that, unfortunately for fans who love that as a pure play product, probably not the direction that the House of Mass will take it in the future?
I don't have any inside info on that, inside the 10-yard line or not, basically. But yeah, I think the real thing with Disney broadly, not just with the digital assets, but, some are saying that they see all this stuff as a precursor to them selling off the old school cable networks. I see them as keeping them all together and, yeah, trying to sell advertising across all of them. So I don't really know if they're going to touch the red zone experience. I've heard from some people, some of my children who are big football fans too, have really talked about what it's going to mean for the product. And so that's probably a huge consideration. You want to hope that ESPN treats it in a way that subscribers for $30 a month is what they're talking about like it. So I hope it doesn't get ruined, and I hope our Rams keep putting a lot of touchdowns in there as well out here in LA, man. All right.
I hope my New York Football Giants put any touchdowns up on the
Yeah.
board this year. That would be a nice departure
Yeah.
from last season. Let me ask you a little bit more about Disney's earnings. Any concern here about pricing out of families? I mean, I know that park expansion was a big priority. Obviously, you separate the kind of DTC business from the parks. Where are we looking at in terms of pricing pressures for
Yeah.
families? It's a lot more expensive for a family of four to go now than it was even just a few years ago, Seth.
Yeah, it really is. That's probably the big thing that we're seeing around the parks. The parks are like always the heart of that business. They're not always out front and center. They're not the most glamorous thing to talk about, and they've got a lot of competition there. Universal's got something that's pretty exciting as well in Orlando. But that's probably the biggest consideration is how much can you charge, whether it's per cap or getting faster in line, whatever it is, before you start really hitting that point where people can't afford it anymore. And I think that's a real question right there, unquestionably. So I mean, I'm sure they'll manage it, but I think that's probably the only sensitivity I'd mention. Look, as long as there's families and kids, Orlando is still going to be a great destination. There are going to be macro factors that always affect it, but I still see Disney as a model and a leader there, and not just talking about Orlando. There's parks in China and in Europe, and obviously the new one coming in Abu Dhabi. So I still see that as like a very big piece of what they're doing. And I'll also just say, Iger's made all these smart acquisitions, right? Pixar, basically, the Fox acquisition. These are things that keep that enterprise rolling over time. They just announced that they're going to pull the Hulu app actually into Disney Plus as well, while also having a couple options. But I see Hulu as like an incredibly important part of their engine as well. The prestige content shows like The Bear that's in there, lots of cool stuff internationally they bring in. So, it's a really diverse sort of set of offerings. To me, it's kind of Disney Plus and Netflix, and the others are, for the most part also ran. So I still see it as a really positive story.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, when you mentioned the acquisitions, whether it was Marvel, 21st Century, you just mentioned the Bear, that's an FX product. Correct me if I'm wrong. These were Bob Iger 1.0 deals. What is
Well,
the
I
biggest
mean,
win so
yeah,
far of
that
Iger 2.0?
probably true. Yeah. I mean, these are things that have revved up over time. I'll even go back before there was a guy named Michael Eisner. There's been other leaders in there before. There's a board. There's a lot of entities in that company that are looking to position it properly, basically. So, yeah, for sure, that probably was an earlier, a rev, if you will. Pixar we didn't even mention as well. So these are things that over time, if you're running a big, broad creative enterprise, you kind of got to set up for the future. I mean, probably newest thing out here, we didn't mention it, but about a week ago, the Paramount acquisition got approved with Skydance, and so it's a little early to tell what's going to happen there. But I would bet the new leadership team that's in there, Jeff Shell, some of these people that are running it for Ellison, are probably looking at similar principles. How do you go about repositioning? A new studio for the future, basically, whether that's games or technology. They're making a lot of noises about what it is. It's not clear what the evidence is going to be the way you're seeing it with Disney. But I think that's the real question.
Is there also a question on political pressure on any or all of these deals? I mean, it's not just the deals like like the Sherry, right? This or that. It's, I
Yeah,
also think of political pressure a few years ago from even things like the state of Florida against Disney over this
yeah.
controversial piece of legislation where under the previous CEO, it found itself in the crosshairs of Governor Ron DeSantis. I mean, are we in a world where politics is inextricably linked with the present and the future of these entertainment and media giants?
I hope not. I think these are really strong American enterprises that are competitive on their own. And I mean, I think regulatory scrutiny is always going to be a part of the mix. And I think, you know, I'm actually encouraged. I'll put aside the politics because I kind of see it as a no-win situation to comment on it either way. I think what a lot of these enterprises are trying to do, the older school ones that come from the traditional workings of Hollywood, if you will, the studios, are trying to figure out a way to stay relevant going forward. And it probably does mean shedding old school assets, merging others together, but it also means looking at new tech like games and social media and how you position yourself. And so, yeah, I think that piece of it is probably somewhat of an obstacle to helping them all kind of keep growing and succeed, basically. So, I think it's always going to be a part of the landscape. But I will, look, I will say, I think just to go back to Disney, I think they're very adept at managing all this stuff, basically. And I think, in Orlando per se, they're the king of that town, and they're not just responsible for things like driving revenue around the parks. They bring people into the city. There's a whole economic uplift effect around it with hotels, with restaurants, with airports. And you want to kind of see the big picture there and hope these things get put together so they can compete with the tech titans.
Yeah. I'm about out of time, Seth. So real quick, if you can, Spotify raising prices, a big deal? Yes or no?
Yeah, it's a great thing. Music is undervalued compared to video, and you get everything under the sun for $15 or whatever it is. So absolutely, they should raise prices. It should get distributed equitably to artists as well. And yeah, absolutely. I'm all for that. And I hope it doesn't alienate consumers, but it's high time that they raise prices.
It's Seth Schachner, managing director at Strat Americas, one of our absolute favorites. We love to talk to this time of
Great to
every
be here.
quarterly earnings season. Seth, thank you as always.
Great to be here. Thank you.